Bonjour, guten Tag, ciao. In this month's video, we are talking about international assets and overseas beneficiaries in an estate planning context. This may sound like a taxing topic, but it's actually really important in a day and age where so many people live and work overseas. So what are some of the things you should consider if you own assets or overseas or are living overseas? Well, you have to take into consideration the laws of the country where the assets are held. There are heaps of super complex conflict of laws provisions at play here, a subject that I was pretty wishy-washy about at uni. But the general principle is that the law according to the person's residence or domicile applies to movable assets like bank accounts, shares, personal items. And the law where the property is located applies to immovable assets, mainly land. But it gets even more complicated than that. Some countries will recognise an Australian will, for example the UK, and other countries are members of the Unidroit Convention, which recognises what's known as an international will. There may also be forced inheritance laws at play here, and we also need to be careful not to be caught by inheritance taxes or death duties that apply in other countries. So our recommended course of action generally is to have a separate will which deals with foreign assets complying with the laws of that country. You should also consider the residency requirements for your self-managed super fund to ensure it remains an Australian complying super fund. But what if all of your assets are held in the land down under, but the people you want to benefit are living overseas? Well, one of the main things you need to consider here is triggering a capital gains tax if you leave property to a non-resident. A couple of key workarounds to think about. One, consider what type of assets you're leaving to foreign beneficiaries. It might be better to leave them cash rather than assets in kind. Secondly, consider establishing a testamentary trust under your will that can be structured to be an Australian resident testamentary trust and potentially avoid triggering a capital gains event if you transfer property into that trust structure. You should also address practical and logistical considerations if you are appointing executors or attorneys that are living overseas, like how do they sign documents, for example. In the coming months at Partners Legal, we will look at some of these issues in more depth via our newsletter articles, so stay tuned. In the meantime, Prost, zum Wohl!